Hey, good morning, and welcome back to the Collective Church NWA. So I started out by trying to be outside today, and was sweating through my shirt within like 14 seconds. And so back inside, little vibey feel with the LED and the lights, and I know that I'm like it's a little bit moodier and vibier in here and a little bit darker, but. I also just wanted to do it in this room just to change it up a little bit. Today we're going to be looking at James 5, which means we actually skipped a little bit of James 4, but I'm going to go back and refer to it, and we're going to let the end of James 4 lead into James 5 and what we're going to be looking at there. And on the surface, it kind of seems like something that we wouldn't normally go, oh, this has to do with me, or oh, I'm so excited to hear this. And to be honest with you, that's most of James for me. As much as I love the book, most of it just makes me go, I really could have done with something a little bit that doesn't point out things that I need to work on. I prefer things that I just go, oh yeah, that's a really good one. Oh gosh, that's good. Man, that's a great statement. Like, man, that's true. Those, okay, that's great. The ones that are hard, I want to go, oh, I'm going to have to spend some time on figuring this out for myself. I'm going to have to get curious. Or the ones that are hard. So, anyway, we're going to look at James 4, and then we're going to move into James 5. And so, at the end of James 4, we just came out of the whole kind of judging and the neighbor thing that we talked about, that's God's role, because God was built to be the judge. We are not built to be the judge. And this is what it says at the end of James 4, verses 13 through 17. Come now, who you say, today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? I love that James is kind of like, it kind of sounds like today, like what really is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is a sin. So it's kind of like this idea again of, look, this is kind of God's territory. God's the one that knows. He's the one that is aware. His life is not a vapor. It is not a mist. He is very much someone who knows the right thing to do, and he never fails to do it. And so as we're looking at this, we're kind of looking at the idea of this arrogance, or trying to step into God's position, or trying to step into God's role, or trying to do something that we're not built to do. And it ends chapter 4 that way, of basically asking the question, like, what really is your life? Like, where are you really? What is your deal? And then we get into chapter 5. Now, again, you got to be thinking, what is happening in the church, the Big C church, like the universal church? What is happening in the church that makes James write these words? Because he wouldn't be writing them if something was not happening that needed to be addressed. It's like when I talk to my kids, most of the time, now there are times when I'm proactive, but a lot of my conversation in trying to help change behavior is talking about things that have occurred and trying to help to change behavior, and trying to help see something go from what it is into something I want it to be. And that's what James is doing. James is aware of things that are happening in the church. He was aware of arrogance. He was aware of people trying to step in and take on the role of God. And then we get to chapter 5. And this is the one where I was like, does this really apply to me? Like, do I really have a problem with wealth? Do I really have a problem? I'm not rich. Unless you talk to people and they look at overall the way that the world is set up, that if you have a mortgage in America, that you are wealthy in context of the entire world. So as we think about this today, I would kind of hope that we can do this right before we get started, that we all assume that this is talking to us. Now, I know that that's weird to kind of go, I'm going to assume, because sometimes we go, God, that's about that person. But today I want us to kind of all start on the same footing, the same foundation, the same grounding, in that today is talking to us. So, chapter 5, it's called Warning to the Rich. Now, what James is identifying here is in a setting like the church, where we are trying to establish something, that we are to live dependent on God. We are to live dependent on Him staying connected to us, and that we are staying connected to him. James 4:8, that we will draw near to him, he will draw near to us, that we will resist the devil, and figuring out what it means to flee, that we want to submit ourselves, we want to hand ourselves over in obedience to God, that there is this connectivity. So James understands the connectivity, and he also understands that wealth, that it's very easy to fall into living independently from God because of wealth. If you think about it, the rich young ruler came to Jesus and was asking a question, basically, how do I inherit eternal life? How do I get the kingdom of God? Jesus knew this guy's story. He wasn't inherently saying that wealth is bad, but for this guy, this wealth had replaced the role that God had in his life, and he had allowed it to become the controlling factor of his life. So Jesus knew this. And so Jesus looks at him and says, you got to give all that up. And the dude was like, I'm out. Like, there's no way. There's literally no way. And it says that he even walked away sad, which what I think is incredible is that he walked away sad. And the reason is because he knew he missed it. He knew that he had been given the correct answer. And then he walked away and knew that he had missed out. He had chosen wealth, this richness, as the controlling thing that is in his life, instead of replacing that. It doesn't mean that he was going to have to become poor. It was just the controlling thing in his life. He was going to have to give that up as a source of control, and he was going to turn it over to Jesus as a source of control. So James is aware that this goes on, and he says this, come now you rich, the most likely to live independently from God. Come now you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Now that's just a very uplifting, fun verse that I'm going to read to you again. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Now that's very kind of Old Testament-ish to think about weeping and howling. Now think about that for a second. Weeping, I understand. Think about the word howling. If you just read past it, you go, man, that's bad. I don't really understand it in the context. Howling doesn't make sense. Howling is for dogs. Howling is for wolves. Howling is for canines that live in a wooded area. But if you think about the dramatic nature of what they're saying there, not only will you weep, but come now, you rich. Come now, those who live potentially danger, with the danger that you're going to live independently from God because of the wealth that you have. And because, looking at the end of chapter 4, because of the arrogance that comes with some of that, weep and howl, you rich, for the miseries that are coming upon you. Verse 2, your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and the corrosion will be evidence like you and will eat your flesh like fire. Now, again, this starts to get a little TV PG, moving into TVMA, because the idea is that you are bound by wealth. You are bound by getting more wealth. You are bound by greed in that it eats away at you. It eats away at you. So it's not just, my dog, it's not just that you have wealth. It's that you are bound up. You are controlled by this desire to get wealth and to keep wealth. And it says in verse 2, hey, those riches that you think are so important, rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. That what the wealthy, those that are struggling in this area of allowing it to be an obstacle to their connection to God, saying all that stuff that you are obtaining, honestly, aren't doing anything like you want. They don't really have the lasting power that you think they're going to have in what really matters. And it says this, verse 4. Oh, I'm sorry, the end of verse 3. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Verse 4. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. Looking at this idea of the wealth that you have was obtained by fraud, that you have robbed to get it, that you have not even gotten the wealth in the right way. And at the same time, as you have gotten the wealth, it has become, you are bound by it, you are controlled by it. There's this idea that trusting in that wealth for things that we should trust God for, there is the issue. Now, we hear things all the time like money can't buy you happiness. And look, I've never had a substantial amount of money, but I will tell you this. I understand what people say about money can't buy you happiness, but money can buy you some very, very incredible things, and money can buy you some very happy times. What I mean by that is if you spend money and go to Hawaii, you can have a great time. You can have a happy time in Hawaii. But in the same way that money can't buy you happiness, poverty can't buy you happiness either. And so the idea there is that it's not money. The idea there is that, is money going to be able to do what only God is built to do? Is money going to be able to be what only God was meant to be? And the answer to that is no. So yeah, I understand what people are saying about money can't buy your happiness, but money is not evil. Having a lot of money is not evil. The love of allowing your entire existence to be controlled by, being bound up by it, so you cannot live out the life that God desires for you, or where you have replaced wealth and replaced money, and you've allowed that to become the controlling place in your life instead of your connection to God, instead of the real God, the real Jesus leading you. That's when we begin to have issues. The arrogance that comes with it, the idea that you're trying to obtain all these things, but the truth is, chapter 5 is saying you're never going to get what you desire to get. If we rob or we do people wrong in order to obtain that wealth, then there is an issue, and that's where they are talking about a warning to the rich. And that's why I think you got to start thinking, what was happening in the church? Now, I want to read you a couple things that I found. We are compelled to observe. So we are compelled to observe that riches do present an additional and significant obstacle to the kingdom. Think about the rich young ruler. He had everything monetarily and financially and resource-wise that people wanted. He got to the right person, and he asked the right question. Man, how many times have you gotten to the right person and asked the right question, and then you got the right answer? For you specifically, not just the deal, because the deal, Jesus is not saying that wealth is bad. Wealth was a concern for this dude, because just like wealth could be a concern from everybody, but Jesus was being specific, and the guy heard the right answer. He asked the right question to the right person, got the right answer, and walked away sad because he knew he had missed it. There's an obstacle to something like this greed that comes with wealth, this controlling, this being bound up, because as the rich, that there is something there, there's potential obstacles that are there that are significant to what Jesus wants to do. The pursuit of riches, the pursuit of wealth, when we are controlled and we are bound by that, man, that can lead to a ton of different type of sins. Even the kinds that are mentioned at the end of this passage, where, man, are you obtaining this wealth in a way that honors God? The miseries that are listed here in verse 1, man, talking about the destiny, talking about, man, how miserable it is when you miss connecting to God because you have allowed yourself to have this obstacle in wealth that keeps you from really living out the life that you desire to live out, or that God desires for you to live out. So why does any of this matter? Why does James 5, 1 through 6, leading in from the end of James 4, why does this matter? Why are we concerned about this thing called wealth? And that's because wealth, the control of wealth, the greed, the being bound up by wealth, obtaining wealth in a fraudulent or in a robbing way, and there's some dramatic language at the end of this passage that talks about that. When we do that, we are allowing wealth to be a distraction for us to really connect to God. So as we think about this today, I asked you at the very beginning, let's pretend like we're all on the same page here. Let's pretend like we're all on the same foundation. Let's pretend like we're all on the same footing here. So here's the deal. I got to start thinking, so I've never had a lot of money. I still don't have an exorbitant amount of wealth at all. And so is this passage speaking to me? Well, when I first heard this passage years ago, I was like, I'm never going to worry about this. I don't ever see myself being rich. I don't ever see myself being in a place where I even have to worry about this. Now, I would love to have to worry about being wealthy, if I can be really honest with you. It would be amazing to have so much money you could help people like you wanted to, do whatever you wanted. But with that, what this is saying and what James is realizing, what James is seeing or hearing, is that this is becoming an obstacle. It is becoming a distraction to what God is wanting to do in the early church, to what God is wanting to do in the lives of individuals. And as it's doing, it's like it permeates. It permeates through the church, and it leads to a multitude of different sins. It leads to miseries. Now, not from wealth, but from obtaining the wealth in a fraudulent manner, from robbing from others to obtain the wealth, allowing yourself to be so bound up and controlled by wealth that it has now become something that God was only intended to be. God is intended to meet these needs. God is intended to be the one that you are satisfied in. So as we look today, I just want you to think about this, that you are probably not sitting there going, God, I have more money than I know what to do. Probably not, maybe. The question is for all of us, with the wealth that we have and the fact that we do live where we live and we have what we have, even though that we might not consider ourselves to be rich, in the broader context of what is happening in the world, we are wealthy. And the question is getting more money bad? No. Is being bound up and controlled by that and the greed that comes with that to where you have allowed what God wants to do to be replaced by your pursuit for this wealth? Now we have an issue. Now we have some things that need to be evaluated. So why does this matter? I believe it mattered to the early church because think about what could potentially happen when greedy people and people that are bound up and controlled by wealth began to infiltrate the church. Think about what could happen with relationships. Think about what could have happened if they came in and tried to buy all of their desires with their money to make the church happen. Think about what would happen if people were really living out what it said at the end, is that you have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. It doesn't just say luxury, it says, and then you have indulged in yourself and you have fattened your hearts. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. Think about that. Like, if that is what wealthy people were kind of being characterized by, think about how that could hurt the church. Think about it could hurt the people that in the earlier parts of James that we are called, those without, we are called to minister to, the orphans and the widows and those that don't have as much. Think about the way that it could hurt them, the way that they could see the church. So as we look at our time today in our discussion in your homes, wherever you are, and as we look at in the chat, we can't think of this as, hey, we're on the Forbes top 10 richest people in the world, or we're in Arkansas's top 100 or anything like that. That is not at all what we can think about. What we need to look at is, like, in our hearts, the wealth that we have, knowing that in the broader context of what is happening in the world, we do have a sense of wealth. Are we being greedy? Are we being controlled? Are we bound up by the wealth that we have, or are we bound up by the pursuit of other wealth? Is it to the point to where it potentially gets to the place where it says, your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire? That it will just take you out because you were so consumed with this wealth or the desire for more. It's like, what do we do with our money? Do we give to God with that wealth? It's part of our connection, not just this idea that we connect with God, but even the way that we do everything that we do is what we have allowing us to connect to God. And I would just say to you that this passage is rough for me, again, not because of like last week when I was just like, gosh, my words have gotten me in so much trouble. It's because I don't really know where I fall in this. Like, I have a hard time saying, Chuck, you live in a place of wealth. I was like, nope. But again, with what I do have, with the amount of resources and stuff that I do have, what's it doing with my connection to God? Is it an obstacle at all to what God is trying to do in me? Is the pursuit of more controlling? Is it bounding me up? And again, this is not about having ambition. This is not about wanting to take care of your family. Because again, I don't believe money is bad. I don't believe having a lot of money is bad. I believe just like anything else, we have to evaluate, because obviously James saw something. And God saw it fit to make sure that it was included in the scripture. And so we've got to at least kind of make margin and space and make room for the fact that James and God know something about what money can do to people. And it's got to be something that we evaluate. And it's got to be something that we look at and we make sure that it is never a stumbling block to who we are, a stumbling block to the church or to the fellowship, the body of believers that we are meeting with. It's never a block for the Collective Church NWA. It's not a block for any of our small groups or our gatherings or our online stuff. That we make sure that we never allow significant obstacles to come into place because of wealth or the pursuit of wealth. So I hope that today gives you an opportunity just to kind of discuss. Maybe you're like me, that's like, I just don't even know what to do with these verses. This is hard for me because I'm not wealthy. I've never been rich. I don't even know what to do with that money. Whether you're in a place where you don't know where money's coming from, or you're in a place where you feel really comfortable, or you're in a place where you're super, super, super rich. I believe the lesson to learn from this is we can never allow it, like the rich young ruler, we can never allow wealth or the desire for it to control and to bind us up to where we get to the right person, we ask the right question, we hear the right answer, and we literally place and position ourselves connected to Jesus, having a conversation with him, and walk away sad because we know we've allowed money and the greed and controlling that can come from that, the binding up that can come from wanting that to be so important in our lives, that we actually miss Jesus because of it. So today in your groups, today at your homes, spend some time talking, man. Help us out in the chat. Share as you feel led to share. I want to thank you guys so much. Don't forget about July 11th. I'm excited about our gathering at the Big Red Barn. I'm excited about playing volleyball after. I'm excited about all of that. So listen, get excited about it too, and have an incredible day today. And thank you already for how you're going to help us and make us better as you include your thoughts in the chat. Thank you guys so much.